All right, now we're moving on to internal anatomy for the turtle. The first thing we'll start with is the esophagus. So the esophagus we saw on the inside of the mouth. So coming from inside the mouth goes right into the structure right here. There's a little bit of a hole in it, which is why we saw it poking through. But this right here is the esophagus, so it tends to be a little bit flabbier. There's no cartilage reinforcing it or anything like that. And it's very muscular. It just feels kind of flabby. It's muscular because of the contractions that help pull food down into the stomach, which is back here. The stomach is a little difficult to find sometimes because it's underneath the left lobe of the liver. So this right here is the stomach, and as usual, leads directly into the duodenum. The duodenum is horizontal in the body of the turtle. So this right here is a duodenum, and again, the duodenum is responsible for receiving the secretions from the liver and from the pancreas, while the stomach is responsible for chemical and mechanical digestion. Chemical digestion just means that it's going to use acids and some enzymes to help break down food, and mechanical digestion means that it's going to churn up and break up the food. So then here's the duodenum, like I said, and then this lighter portion directly anterior to it is the pancreas. Okay, it's responsible for producing insulin. Then we have the liver. Liver is one of the larger organs in the body, and it tends to be kind of tender. Here's the liver of this turtle, and if we wanted to look over here to get an idea of just how large the liver can be, this whole portion is liver, as well as this whole portion. Okay, so that's the liver. The gallbladder can be a little bit tricky to find inside of the turtles, but they're going to be underneath the right lobe of the liver, and they tend to be rather green. Okay, the liver is responsible for producing bile and enzymes that help with digestion, and they can also be used to help detoxify blood. And the gallbladder is responsible for storing the bile that the liver produces, which is why it's so closely associated with the liver. Then we'll move on to the small intestine. You can see the small intestine right here. It's highly coiled, and it's much longer than the large intestine, but you can see how skinny it is in some spots. And even over here where it's a bigger small intestine, it's still rather skinny. And then the large intestine is simply the part where it's going to straighten out and widen. So here is the large intestine for the male, and then the large intestine over here for the female. Again, it's the straight portion. They don't look all that much wider than the small intestine for most of the turtles, but if you just remember that it's the straight portion that leads into the cloaca, then you'll be in good shape. Going back into the mouth, for the respiratory structure, the glottis is going to be a little slit directly behind the tongue. So here is the glottis right here, and that actually leads right into the trachea. Glottis is surrounded by larynx, so here's the glottis. This is the trachea. The trachea, if you get a really good look at it, you can actually see some of the rings of cartilage that help hold it open to allow for air to get down into the lungs. So that's basically just the passageway for air. And then the trachea eventually splits into the right bronchus and the left bronchus. Together they are the bronchi. So that just further directs air into the lungs. The lungs are located very, very far dorsal in the body cavity. We have a lung right here. Okay, and that is where we're going to have oxygen exchanged within some blood, within the capillaries inside of the lungs, and then carbon dioxide will be picked up by the alveoli in the lungs, and then will be expelled out of the body. Okay, now on to the anatomy of the circulatory system. There's only 5 parts that we really focused on. 3 of them for comparative purposes, and then 2 of them because the blood vessels are so prominent. We have the ventricle, which is the portion of the heart that's responsible for pumping blood. So this is the ventricle. This right here is the left atrium, even though it's on the right side of the body. Remember, their left is our right. So this is the left atrium. It receives blood from the lungs. This is the right atrium. It receives blood from the body. Okay, so left atrium, right atrium, ventricle. Those are the 3 chambers of the reptilian heart. Most reptiles do still have the 3 chambers that we saw in the amphibians. The only ones that don't have 3 chambers are crocodilians. They have 4. And then right here we see 2 very prominent blood vessels. This darkish colored one is the left aortic arch. And then this one that looks kind of like it's got a pinkish tinge to it, it's because it's been injected. This is the left pulmonary artery. The left aortic arch is responsible for carrying blood out of the heart and bringing it to the body. So this is going to have oxygenated blood in it. The left pulmonary artery carries blood to the lungs, that's why it's pulmonary, out of the heart, that's why it's an artery, and this is going to be deoxygenated blood. So oxygenated blood is in this one, deoxygenated blood is in this one. Okay. Now we're moving on to the urogenital system. First thing we're going to talk about is the urinary bladder. Try to find them in both. The urinary bladder, unfortunately, on this specimen was ruptured while they opened up the plastron, but the urinary bladder was basically right here. You can kind of see the pouch, or where it was cut. It made like a little pouch right there. The urinary bladder on this specimen is quite well intact, but it's just attached to the plastron, so it would have been right about here in the body. You can see it's basically just like a little baggie, and that's going to hold their urea. Kidneys are going to be located almost in the exact same spot that the lungs were, just more on the posterior end of the organism, or caudal end. So right here is where you'd find the kidneys of the turtle. This is a male specimen, so right here, as I talked about before, coming out of the cloaca, this is its penis. Okay, that would get inserted into the female's cloaca because of the fact that they have internal fertilization. These are testes, so these are going to be responsible for producing sperm for the turtle. Over here is the female. So we have ovaries right here, and there's quite a few eggs inside of the ovaries, and you can see all the different sizes of eggs. Okay, we've got some of the larger ones here, some smaller ones in here. These are, so ovaries are responsible for producing egg cells. And then the oviducts will pass the eggs down to the cloaca. And again, the cloaca is located extremely far caudal inside the body cavity, and this is the cloacal opening right here.